Good afternoon. Welcome back to Career Accelerator Hacks Live. It's Tuesday at 12:15 as always. We're broadcasting out to LinkedIn, to Facebook, and also to YouTube. And today I'm joined by the incredible Michelle Gyimah. Thank you so much for joining me this week.
Thanks for having me, Sally.
No problem. So Michelle is a pay gaps expert and negotiation coach. I have been looking at her from afar for so long. Like I said in my message earlier, I finally plucked up the courage to invite Michelle on as a guest. I was absolutely thrilled when she said yes. As always, this is an opportunity for us to ask questions that we don't know about. You know, it's an open forum, so please don't feel like any question is off topic. But I think it's so important from the work that I do with the women that I work with, and having worked in recruitment for 20 years, to really start talking about pay and pay equality in the workplace. And you are the director of Equality Pay. So are you able to tell us a little bit about what the business does?
Yeah. My business is called Equality Pays, and primarily I work with organizations to help them hold better conversations about money and about pay in the workplace. So typically it's conversations around closing their gender and ethnicity pay gaps, or it could be conversations around how to have better pay transparency in the workplace, because I know that this is something that's really important to a lot of employees. It's something that a lot of employers haven't given much kind of attention to, but I'm starting to see that it's something that's becoming much more important. And as you say, money is a difficult topic for us to talk about, and so some organizations need that support in getting started to upskill and equip their people to hold, productive conversations about pay and money in the workplace.
Fantastic. I have also, obviously got about 100 questions I wanted to ask you about yourself, but I think it's really important for us to really kind of set the scene about what transparency in pay is. And I think probably the first question I've got for you is, do you think it's being employee-led as opposed to employer-led, these kind of conversations, and why it's becoming more and more of a topic of conversation?
Yeah, I definitely think, given where we are right now, it is definitely something that is much more employee-led. And I think part of that is to do with, the upcoming generation of millennials coming into the workplace. Mm-hmm. They are much less willing to put up with some of the stuff that those of us, who've been in the workplace for years and years do. And one of them, is the topic of money. I mean, you only have to go onto Twitter for like 10 minutes to find that somebody somewhere is having a conversation about how much they've negotiated for, how much they got paid. And then before you know, the conversation really spirals because people are chipping in with their bits of information about what's happened to them or somebody that they know. So we're starting to see this concept of money being a much more open topic that people want to talk about and are willing to go and have that conversation. It might not be with their employer to start with, but they're going out there and doing that research beforehand, and then they'll bring that conversation into the workplace. And I think also, given that, the impact that, COVID has had, all of the kind of ripple effect of Black Lives Matters, etc., we're in a place where people are starting to reevaluate their careers, reevaluate the decisions that they make around what they do in their careers, what they're willing to accept and what they're not. Mm-hmm. And obviously, you've heard the phrase being thrown around, the Great Resignation. We even know of people that are leaving jobs and they haven't got anything else lined up, not got anything else to go to, but they're leaving because they're in a space where they're like, I've had enough of X behavior and I want something different, but I'm not going to, do the safe thing or the normal thing of have another job lined up. So I feel that, conversations around equity in pay transparency, closing pay gaps is really, I think it's kind of like being pushed from the outside, from, individuals and society in terms of their expectations of what it is that employees want from their employers. And we're starting to see, I know in conversations that I'm having, starting to see organizations are waking up to this fact and understanding, what the business benefits to them in holding better, transparent conversations about pay are.
Yeah, fantastic, brilliant. Oh, okay, we've got so much to unpick in what you just said there. But can we take a step back, and can you talk to me about your career history, kind of where all this started and where you really stepped into your passion, which is setting up the business?
Yeah, well, I fell into it by accident, but I think like loads of people fall into their careers by accident. So I spent about 8 years at the Equality and Human Rights Commission. So for those of you that don't know, it's non-government department body. I always get the words mixed up. And they basically provide advice for employers, service providers, educational establishments on what the Equality Act says, what the Human Rights Act says, and basically puts it in lay terms so you can understand, okay, if I'm running a business, what are my responsibilities? If I'm an employer or a school or a university, what does the Equality Act and what does it say and what does it mean for me? Mm-hmm. And the area of work that I was in the equal pay team, and I'd never heard of equal pay before. And so it was a real eye-opener for me, suddenly being an equal pay project manager. But, I soon got to grips with it. And that was the start for me in understanding how workplaces worked, but also understanding how discrimination and bias works as well, and how it shows up in the workplace and what the impact was. And my role was to support employers to not do those things. I also did quite a lot of work around pregnancy and maternity discrimination. So again, supporting employers in understanding the kind of needs that parents to be would have, and how to ensure that in their interactions, whether they're going off maternity, on maternity, coming back from maternity, and shared parental leave, how can you ensure that you are treating your employees equitably, and you're not discriminating against them. So I kind of fell into that, and then I decided that I really enjoyed that work, but I wanted to do much more hands-on work with organizations, like, really getting, in there and learning their secrets, not to judge or to, share them, but to give much more practical advice around, how to address some of the issues that were coming up. And so that was how my business was born. And I started that whilst I was on maternity leave with my first child.
Wow, fantastic. Which is just, it's fantastic achievement in itself, isn't it? But I think a lot of women, and a lot of the women that I even speak to now, I was coaching someone 2 weeks ago who was on maternity leave, who was made to feel like she had a condition, and that condition was worsening the more and more pregnant that she got. And there was absolutely no support. And I think there's a fine line, isn't there, from women being on maternity leave and not being contacted by work because, they need to be off and be able to, focus on the family. But also then creates this kind of, this distance between the two parties. And women face a lot of anxieties coming back and then adjusting back to the workplace, now being a mother. And I think there needs to be more work done around that, really, to ensure that those transitions in and out. Because what you do find, and what we do find, is that women then just leave the workplace and they don't know what to do.
Yeah, and that all comes to, having those conversations early on and building that trust and building up that relationship, and, asking questions and finding out, okay, this is your thinking now. How do you want to be contacted? How often would you like to be contacted? But also, having that thing of saying that if I'm contacting you about what's happening in the workplace, or, new job roles that are coming up, whatever's going on, it's not me imposing. I'm doing my best to keep you in the loop. So I think, again, rather than assuming, oh, I can't do this because, or I should do this because, it's much better if you can kind of set those parameters beforehand. And then if you get it wrong, you can put your hands up and say, oh, I didn't mean to intrude in that way. I'm sorry. And, and you can figure it out, because, we're all adults. I think we can have adult conversations about this.
Absolutely. And let me ask you, why do we find it so difficult to talk about money?
Yeah, I think it's because we're conditioned not to talk about it. And sometimes I wonder, is this something that's peculiarly British thing? But then, I do know of people from other nationalities that have their own kind of issues with money. But I know for us, it's definitely it's a taboo subject. It's something that you don't talk about. So we don't talk about it generally, you know, with our friends, with our families. I know some couples have real hard times talking about money, you know, between themselves. But then, like, if you add like the workplace as well, that place where you're supposed to be like uber professional and put your best face on and not show any weaknesses and vulnerability, it just becomes like an even more taboo subject. And so I think, and one of the other things as well is that how much we earn is definitely something that we use as a mark or a measure as to what our value is. And so we do this for ourselves, and then other people do it for us. And then you wrap it up into this nice tight ball, and you're just like, okay, I'm just never going to talk about money, because why would I go into that emotional mess, that emotional space over there? It's just too much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. We put so much weight on how much someone earns, you know, and what that lifestyle that then allows them to have. Or it's crazy, isn't it? And I think as well, a lot of kind of, like you said, in terms of the, you know, interrelationships at home, it's incredible how much money isn't spoken about.
Incredible.
Isn't it?
Really, really incredible. Like, even just things I could think of, like I'm in a couple of, you know, parenting Facebook groups, and it always astounded me the number of people who they'd have a child with their partner, first child, second child, whatever, and then there was always an assumption that the woman would go part-time. And so they'd come into the group saying, oh, I can't believe it, you know, Dean's expecting me to go part-time and he's not willing to talk to his, you know, employer about flexibility, and we're having rows about money and all this stuff. And I was just a bit like, but did you not have the conversation about, you know, the financial impact, like what you're bringing another child into the family, they cost money. So, you know, where was the conversation about, you know, how you would like manage things? And even if you didn't know to the nth degree, you know, exactly what you needed down to the last penny, I was always a bit astounded that, you know, there wasn't even a general conversation as to, you know, who's going to reduce their hours, or can you both reduce hours, and what would that look like financially, and, you know, how much is nursery fees, and, you know, how much are childcare vouchers, you know, all those things. So you know, again, even within couples, you know, it's supposed to be your nearest and dearest, people still struggle to have that conversation about, you know, about money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, what we then see is a lot of females leaving the workplace to then work part-time, but then that does impact the level of role that they can do. That impacts their pension pot, you know, in terms of, you know, wealth later on in your life. And I think that has a huge impact. I mean, talking kind of from first-hand experience, I'm very much expected, I recruit at the senior level, I'm expected to produce and submit kind of gender and ethnicity neutral shortlists for senior roles. And I think what a lot of organisations don't understand is that it's impossible to do that. And it's impossible to do that because females and those of an ethnic minority don't have the same opportunities as the workforce that are in there at the moment.
Yeah, and I think I can see the value in wanting to do that, but you do need to take a step back and realize that, you know, in order for people to reach those senior roles, they need to have had some kind of career progression. And so if you are finding that you can't, you know, give a balanced shortlist in terms of gender or ethnicity, it's not that these women are not there through choice. They're not there because of, you know, the system of what's happened earlier on in their careers. So for me, if you're finding yourself in that situation where you're being asked to present these shortlists and then you don't find it, it can be very easy for organizations to say, oh, well, we looked and they weren't there. But you need to flip that back and say, well, what did you do to them to be in a situation where they're not there? Because there are lots of capable women that could be in senior roles. There are lots of capable people from ethnic minority backgrounds that could be in senior roles. Why aren't there? And it's never their fault. But if you're working in a system that does not support them, of course they're not going to be there, or they're going to be very, very few. And even the few that make it probably have quite a lot of battle scars to tell you about how they got there and what their experience is. So for me, it really is about pushing the onus back onto organizations, because they create the systems that people are working in. And so if they're looking to ascertain better targets, they need to be looking at, well, asking more questions like, why don't you have the numbers that you should have, given the demographics of the region, the city, the country that you live in?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So what advice could you give to us to start having these conversations internally? How can we kind of get off the starting blocks?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to understand what it is that you want to talk about when it comes to pay, because it can be all sorts of things. I mean, when I'm talking to organizations about pay transparency, I can literally see people's eyes bulging out of their heads because they think it means, posting everybody's salary on a piece of paper, in the kitchen, and then everybody can go and have a look, because that is what people think it is. But pay transparency is ensuring that people understand how your pay system works, and it shouldn't be complicated. Some organizations it is, but it shouldn't be complicated. People should be able to see and to be able to place themselves and say, okay, this is where I am now, and if I want to get here, this is what I need to do next. And so it's about having that simplistic way of understanding where you are, so that you can then make conscious decisions about what it is that you want to do next, and have those open conversations, with your line manager, with HR, whoever, the person is that's in charge of making those decisions, and ensuring that you can both do it, and not doing it from a place of high emotion or feeling really uncomfortable, so you want to shut the conversation down, because I know that does happen as well. So it's important to understand, what is it you want to talk about? So is it pay transparency? Is it about, your latest gender pay gap report that, the data doesn't look good, but you're going to be holding an internal conversation about it, and you want to know how to broach the subject and how to deal with the, emotions that might be flying around? Is it about the fact that you're considering ethnicity pay gap reporting and you suspect that the numbers are not going to be good, but everybody's really uncomfortable about it, but you're getting prepared for it? So again, it's about going back to, what do you want to talk about and why? And what does a good conversation about a difficult topic look like for you?
And obviously how you can structure that and work through it, and like you mentioned before, upskill the managers, who I think, being in a management position, there's a huge amount of responsibility, isn't there, to get things right. And I think people are so scared of getting things wrong, and I think especially when it comes to talking about race, people are absolutely petrified, aren't they, of offending anyone, or coming across in the slightest bit racist. And I think unless we start having the conversations and make mistakes and try and better ourselves, we're not part of the change, are we?
Yeah, exactly. And I see this a lot, where organizations are hiding behind the data. So they have this information, they know what the impact is, they know what it looks like, they know what the problems are. But again, it's that thing of, oh, this is too hard to discuss. And I kind of feel like, okay, it's fine for it to be hard, but you don't have the privilege of just not discussing it, because the impact is still happening in your organization. And you have to ask yourself, do you think as a business you're going to have a good legacy if you keep ignoring these problems? Do you think you're still going to be relevant in 5 to 10 years? Remember all those people I was talking about on Twitter having conversations about their salary? They'll be having conversations about the discrimination and the bias that they faced. And you don't have any control over who sees that. You don't have any control over how people make decisions once they have that information. So you could be putting out the best stuff on LinkedIn, you can be winning awards left, right, and center. But if you have, employees or ex-employees talking about their experiences, who do you think, potential employees are going to be looking at? Who do you think your existing employees are going to be looking at? They're not going to be looking at, all your trophy wall. If they know that you consistently underpay women, you consistently underpay people from ethnic minority backgrounds, you consistently shut down those conversations. So you don't know if there is any pay equity, and you probably suspect that there isn't. So there is that piece of, yes, it's difficult, but there is more risk in not starting to hold these conversations.
Yeah, I absolutely couldn't agree more. And I think as well, in terms of what is more important to people now, it's being felt, it's feeling that you're valued in the workplace, isn't it? It's knowing that you're getting recognised and rewarded for the job that you're doing. And what I tend to see a lot is that people who have worked for organisations for 10 years plus, they're paid, well below market rate. But they find security in that. And I think there's another kind of piece around kind of almost kind of social conditioning from our parents' generation of get into a job and stay in a job and stay for it as long as you possibly can. And being unemployed is the worst possible thing that you could do.
Yeah.
And it's kind of ingraining us. So we put up with stuff that we don't feel that comfortable with. But we are absolutely seeing this tide changing now, aren't we?
Yes, yeah, definitely. And the tide is changing, but also people are feeling braver about doing it, because talking about your pay situation in the workplace is not for the faint-hearted. For all of the things that we just discussed, it's not as simple as sending an email to your manager and saying, oh, can we have a chat about my salary, as if you were asking somebody to go out for coffee or something. It comes with so much kind of emotional baggage, and that's just the stuff that's going on in your head. And then if you kind of add to the mix of being unsure about how they're going to receive it and how they'll perceive it and what the outcome might be for you, it's very easy to think, oh, it's too difficult to do. Yeah. But we're starting to see that people are being braver in the sense of saying, well, I have one shot at life, and I want to have a career that is valuable and meaningful. I want to work somewhere where I do feel like getting up in the morning and going. And when I see my pay packet, it does make me feel good. When I access, those other salary benefits, I am grateful and I am happy with what I have. So I think people are starting to choose the levels of happiness in their workplace. I think is definitely going up.
And I know that we spoke briefly before around, us finding it difficult to talk about money, but then the recipient of us having this conversation about money, then kind of shuts that conversation down quite quickly because they feel uncomfortable talking about money. How do we get around that?
Yeah. And I've seen that. I've experienced it myself. In personal situations, and I've talked to clients, and I've heard examples of this. So one example is a financial organization. So we've had a couple of women wanting go into HR individually, so it wasn't like something that was planned, just individually saying, want to talk about gender pay gap here and just figure out where I am on the scale and talk about promotion, etc. And to a T, all of them walking away and feeling that they were made to feel that they were greedy. And what was quite interesting about that is that if this happened, I think it was one or two people in HR, and it happened to a couple of people within the organization, and nobody talked to anybody else about it for quite a long time. And then it came up in conversation with two people, and another two people said, oh, actually that happened to me. And then they realized that there was a pattern. And quite often what happens is when somebody raises the conversation about pay or money, the person that's in the receiving end, if they are not in a space where they have the relevant information to answer the questions, or they have the skills to be able to handle the conversation, it can be really uncomfortable. And when you're uncomfortable, what do? We deflect. We look for ways in which we can shut the conversation down, push something back onto someone else, make them feel guilty, basically do anything for them to just go away. Yeah. And in this example, this is what's happened. And so I think a lot of us, when we're engaging in uncomfortable conversations about money, we kind of resort to these enabling behaviors, of which is basically saying, stop talking about this. This is not appropriate. I don't want to talk about it. So rather than admit, I feel uncomfortable, I don't know the answers, or something else, it's a case of, I'm going to make you feel bad by saying X, and hopefully you'll get the message and stop talking, which is what has happened in this organization. However, that might be a short-term solution in terms of stopping the conversation, but it doesn't help how they feel as a person. Like you said, people want to feel valued. You can't feel valued if, when you're asking a genuine question about your pay or about, gender pay gap in your organization and being shut down, you can't feel valued. Yeah. So then you start to think, should I stay? Or you start to think about, well, where can I get that validation that I need? So again, this is a really good example as to why it's important to upskill people to hold better conversations about pay.
And I think it's a really interesting point that you made there in terms of validation, because I think quite a lot of people put validation on money because, you know, the society that we live in, like we mentioned before, kind of puts this weight on it. But I think it goes one step like level deeper than that, in terms of the validation comes from being rewarded and feeling that you're being rewarded for the work that you're doing and the effort that you're putting in. And you don't have to put a monetary value to that, but being heard and listened to and acknowledged for having the views that you do around the work that you do is so important. And I wonder if that's really the impact it has on the organizations that you work with, this kind of ripple effect of starting these conversations and what that then leads to.
Yeah, I think it does. And you know, it shows you as an organization that's prepared to not only hold difficult conversations, but hold conversations that are of value to your employees. And I think that's something that a lot of companies, they don't, not that they don't take into consideration, but they don't realize how important it is that you need to be talking to your employees about the things that are important to them. You know, what are their drivers? And, you know, fair pay and feeling valued in the workplace is a huge one. I mean, you know, nobody wants to go and work in a workplace where they're not valued. I mean, immediately that's not good for your morale. It's not good for your health. It's not good for productivity. You know, none of those things. And so, you know, it is important to not pick and choose the things you want to talk about based on how comfortable the organization feels. But it's about, you know, what do our employees need? What do I need to provide them so that they can thrive, so that they can stay, so that they'll say good things about our organization, so that we can attract more talent. So it's, you know, it's all connected.
Yeah, it is. Oh, fantastic. So what advice then would you give someone watching this now who really wants to go and then take that first step to, you know, be listened to in terms of how they feel about their pay and reward?
Yeah. So I think, you know, it's always really useful for you to do your research. So, you know, what is it that you want to talk about? You know, is it that you want to talk about pay rise, promotion, bonus? Are you asking questions about pay gaps in general? So get clear on what it is that you want to discuss and what outcomes you're looking for. And I think it's always helpful to, you know, to see what your competitors are doing. Like, you know, what does the market rate look like for somebody, you know, with your skills in your sector? You know, there are loads of places that you can go and get the information. You can go on, you know, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, you know, talk to your network. So gather as much evidence and information as you can. But the other thing that I talk about a lot, which I think gets overlooked, is addressing the kind of emotional stuff that does come up. Because as we said before, talking about money is very, very difficult. And so you do have to acknowledge, you know, what's coming up for you, you know, those feelings of feeling guilty or greedy or shame at doing this. And then really ask yourself, you know, where is that coming from? You know, where is the evidence to say that if I was to go in and ask for a raise of, I don't know, like £10,000 more, you know, where is the evidence to say that I'm actually being greedy? Is it that you're being greedy, or is it that you are just articulating, you know, what you want or what you think your value is based on the market or based on the improvements that you've made and the skills that you have? So I do think there is some work to do around acknowledging that those emotions will come up, but they're never a good enough reason for you to not try, because you don't know what the outcome could be. But also it's good practice for you to advocate for yourself, because other people are not going to do it for you. So you have to be your own advocate. And also to remember that if you don't get what you want or what you're looking for, the conversation goes awry or you clam up and you freeze, etc., it's not the end of the world, and it's not a judgment on you. It's just part and parcel of, you know, the learning process of how to hold these conversations and, you know, how to do the back and forth and how to negotiate. Because I think a lot of people, women in particular, get into that headspace of, if I hear a no, it's a judgment call on me, and it means that I don't deserve it. I'm not worthy. I'm not ready. Whereas if you get a no, you can work with that. Like, okay, what do I need to do differently? What did I do well? what do I need to improve upon? What can I do differently next time? So so it really is about looking at this as a rinse and repeat journey.
I love that, absolutely, because I think you're right. It's these conversations you don't always get right first time. You don't know how somebody else is going to react. And I think it's interesting as well as women and there's a lot of people actually in the workplace, not just women, a lot of people in the workplace really just take for granted all the stuff they've done. They take for granted that they've worked for an organisation for 5 years. They know how that company runs inside and out. They're the go-to person for everything, but they're still being paid a salary that they were 15 years ago.
Exactly.
And we're made to feel grateful to be employed.
Yes.
Don't have to get me started on that. But I think, the point that you made about advocating is something that I think really stuck in my mind the first time we started talking, because I think it's something that I'm so passionate about in Scotch, and the work I do with Scotch is this isn't about us. It's about other women. It's about other women and other people with the ethnic minority background who need someone to start having these conversations. And it's again about that kind of ripple effect of, it's making the points heard in an organization to be the champion for change. I love the phrase, you're not stuck in traffic. You are the traffic. You are the So if you want to make a change, if there's something that you feel uncomfortable about or something that you think needs to be raising, you are the person. You don't have to be the most educated, you don't have to know everything there is to know about that conversation, but you need to start the conversations to be able to question others,
Yeah, definitely. And and I see this just as a business owner. So I'm in a business mastermind, and there's a couple of us that have private conversations. We've recently, in the last, I would say, 9 months, been sharing our numbers of what we've been earning and what we've been charging, and that's been revolutionary for me to know what others are doing in this space, like an actual hard numbers, not like, around this, around that. No, this is what I delivered, and this is how much I said it was going to be, and this is what they paid. And that has been really good for me, because I've been like, right, so these are other female business owners. These are other female business owners of color. And this is how they see themselves. And yes, there might have been lots of fears, lots of doubts, but they've done it. And then organizations have paid. And then I look to myself and go, okay, have I been involuntarily playing small? And maybe I have. So, there is power in holding those conversations to know what is happening behind closed doors. Because again, we don't talk about money very much. And so if you can find yourself in a circle of other people who are willing to share those numbers, confidentially, the ripple effect for you and how you show up and how you own those skills that you have, could be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's been wonderful. I literally could talk to you about this all afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. It's I just think, it's important that we talk about this, we advocate for ourselves, we advocate for others, and we reach out and see if anyone else needs support and, having these conversations.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do. I mean, and it doesn't just have to be the workplace. It could be that, you're not facing up, to your credit cards or your debt. I mean, it's National Talk Money Week next week. Mm-hmm. And so that campaign is all about getting people to, have a conversation about money in a much more open way. And I think part of that work is around demystifying it. And that for me is what is really important. So it could be, yes, it could be salary, it could be pensions, talking about your investments, talking about, bonuses, credit cards, it's all about taking out the mystique and the fear and facing those things head on. Because once you have clarity around what it is that you're trying to achieve or where you are financially, you can then make better informed decisions around what it is that you want to do next. I mean, you talked about, the impact on pensions if women work part-time. Mm-hmm. The pension gender pay gap right now is 40%, which is huge, especially when you consider that women generally live longer than men, and they will spend, a large proportion of their life single because we live longer, so you need that pension money.
Mm.
But if you're not holding that conversation, early in your career, mid-career or at all, then you're not going to find out about that until it's too late. So you're in that pension poverty trap.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really important to be much more open in discussing money. And if you don't know where to start, Google is your friend. There are lots of organizations that can kind of help you get started talking about, whatever it is that you want to discuss around money.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of stuff on Instagram as well. I've been on my own kind of money mindset and kind of journey, I would say, probably over the last 18 months. And I think for me, it was the realization of actually, I'm probably midpoint in my career now, and I really need to stop spending all this money that I earn and actually do something with it, because, your head's buried in the sand, isn't it? And that's just normal life. We're still living, though I've got lots of children now, I'm still living that kind of life. I can just kind of go and do what I want, and I've never really kind of thought about it, but I'm like, this is the time to really get serious about it. And I read the most incredible book called The Wealth Chef, and what it explains, it's written for women to manage their wealth, but it was saying that the first chapter is basically saying it is a skill that you can learn. Okay, you can learn a different language, you can learn to play guitar, you can learn to Zumba, you can learn to go and do some craft work, you can learn how to manage your money. It's a skill that you learn and you develop over time. And like I said, I'm on this, and a lot of it is around that kind of mindset piece that we've spoken about today. But I think my piece of advice is to don't shut the door on it. Don't bury your head and think, oh God, I can just do that another day. The sooner you start this journey yourself, and that is what real advocacy for yourself is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Once you start that journey and take ownership and accountability, the doors of, the possibilities are endless, aren't they?
Yeah, and other people will see you doing it and go, oh, actually, I had never thought about doing X or asking for X. I didn't know that was possible, or I didn't know I was allowed to. That's a big one that comes up. So that advocacy is both for yourself, but also for you role modeling it for other women as well.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Brilliant. Oh, well, thanks, Michelle. I'm going to have you on again. But yeah, good luck next week. I know it's going to be a huge week for you, isn't it, in terms of kind of, National Talk Money. So please follow Michelle if you're not. Her content on LinkedIn is absolutely incredible. And it asks the questions. I mean, your posts, they really cut through. They ask the questions. I'm like, yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. They ask the questions that we need to be asking of ourselves and of others. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. I've had a lot of fun.
Speak to you soon. Bye.